and welcome, welcome. My name is Patty Roush. I am from the Unitarian Universalist Church of DeLand, and I welcome each one of you here to this orientation, a historical perspective, and an informational guide to Project 2025. We are gathered here today in hopes of presenting as much pertinent information as possible concerning Project 2025, the administrative plan of action that the Republican candidate has endorsed. It is our hope that we can all ask questions, hear perspectives, remember that we are all Americans who love our country deeply, and that we are neighbors. This is not a town hall meeting, and therefore, please hold your comments, but share any questions that you have on the cards that Mitzi will be providing. Mitzi's going to raise her hand. She has a basket in her hand. The cards, the questions that are pertinent to the specific panel members will be given to those members so that they can respond. We are fortunate today to have with us several folks with expertise in different areas that are directly affected by Project 2025 initiatives: the environment, the social safety net, medical concerns, and education. Due to our time restrictions, the areas of Social Security impacts, Medicare, Medicaid impacts, regulations, the future of our national parks, and many more issues will largely go unaddressed. However, we have developed handouts that are available in the back of the room that have resources so that you can get your questions answered in those areas. And thinking as I look at this large crowd, perhaps we should have an additional meeting to cover those unaddressed areas. Each of you have received questions and comment cards, hopefully, yes? If you have not, raise your hand and Mitzi will get one to you. As we move through our time together, additional questions will occur to you. Put the questions on the card, send them
Don't
forward.
touch the dolls, please. Please don't touch the dolls.
I almost made the same
Okay. We are going to begin with a brief introduction of our panelists and an introduction of our primary speaker. Then there will be a brief historical perspective from Dr. Croce, and then a short video. At that point, we will be taking questions and comments. Again, many thanks for your presence. It is vital that we conduct our time together, again, remembering that we are neighbors and fellow Americans. I would like to begin my introduction with Dr. Paul Croce. Dr. Croce taught history at Stetson University for 35 years, with scholarship in American intellectual history and courses on big values debates in the United States, past and present. With retirement, he is applying his teaching and research to the public classroom. That is the name of his organization and webpage, with bridge building between academics and public life, and for listening across differences. Thank you, Dr. Croce, for being here.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Wendy Anderson, to myself again, apparently, who is a professor and chair of environmental science and studies at that department at Stetson University. She is also elected countywide to the Volusia Soil and Water Conservation District Board of Supervisors. As a scientist, she has published widely in regional processes involving the flood, concerning regional processes including the flow of energy, nutrients, and water from one ecosystem to another. It is with great pride and appreciation that I welcome you here. Next, we have Jennifer Moore to my right. Jennifer is a marketing consultant and operator of a family-owned arts and crafts boutique in DeLand, Florida. With a career spanning over a decade in sales management, marketing, and web content analytics, she brings extensive expertise in fostering small businesses and supporting creative ventures. Jennifer also serves as a councilperson-elect on the West Volusia Hospital Authority, where she advocates for community health and wellness initiatives. We're very humbled to have you here. Thank you, Jennifer. Lastly, it's the first time I'm meeting you also, Dr. Johann Reipert. Dr. Reipert is currently Associate Professor of French and Francophone Studies and the Director of the Honors Program at Stetson University. Dr. Reipert's research examines how ideologies shape foreign policy decisions with a specific focus on the United States and African policy. Known for his dynamic teaching style, Dr. Reipert combines academic rigor with real-world engagement. We are so honored to have you here. Okay, with that, I would like to turn our meeting over to Dr. Croce. Again, he will present the historical perspective of Project 2025.
Thank you, Patty. Should I take the microphone?
I think so.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I'm okay here if you guys are okay with that. Oh, well then I will. Okay. I am recruited. Okay. So, history is best known for providing knowledge of the past. And that's why Henry Ford said he didn't like it. just one damn thing after the other. But I like to think of history as something more than that. Yes, it's knowledge about the past, but it also provides a kind of balm for the present. Understanding the past can help us deal with the present. And for when we learn about the past and its hopes and fears, it provides a kind of balm to the soul. With those historical bombs, I hope, maybe edging out some political bombs that many people are fearing might be emerging as the country divides. So focus in particular on Project 25. It is most simply a blueprint for governing based on conservative values, especially of the last half century. The project seeks the ear of the next Republican president, even as Donald Trump said he knows nothing, quote, nothing about it. Yet many project writers are his former appointees. So how should we understand this? Well, I learned from one Republican, Terry Schilling, who's president of the American Principles Project. He also wrote part of the Republican platform at their convention in Milwaukee. He just rolls his eyes at this recent news and says, these are the disagreements of two siblings. Well, Trump, who in political slang would be POTUS 47, in other words, the 47th president of the United States, POTUS, he announced his own Agenda 47, which is different from Project 25, but with a lot of overlap. So there are handouts at the table on Project 25 and on Agenda 47. And there's also a comparison right there. That's a colorful one. That's really nice. If we run out, or if you prefer to have them digitally, I also put my cards back there, and you can email me, and I'll email you back. My kids say that email is communication for old people, so there's also a phone number there. You can reach me that way too. So before the videos and the other panelists, I'll provide some context. Past, present, and future. That's my goal. in a few minutes. So first, the past, historical precedents, AKA the making of expected surprises. Okay, Project 25 exhibits conservative values and policies. Its authors at the Heritage Foundation, so it's, strictly speaking, it's written by members of the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank. And they wrote it, quote, with the following principles in mind: free enterprise, limited government, individual freedom, traditional American values, and a strong national defense, unquote. Now, there's a long history of conservatism in the U.S. and in its colonial beginnings, before the beginnings of the nation. The conservatism of Project 25 emerged in the 1960s. How you describe that period of social and political change shows whether you have liberal or conservative leanings. So I'd like to call in a guest speaker. I promised I wouldn't move around, but just a little bit. So I'm going to start with bringing first guest speaker. So, hi, I'm a liberal. I look at the 1960s as a time of liberation. That's why I'm wearing these rose-colored glasses as a liberal. So the 60s was a time when rights finally got recognized for non-whites and for women, with reactions against America's global footprint, starting with the Vietnam War, with recognition of environmental problems, and with a general turn to informality and loosening of standards in public life. As one spectator said after the March on Washington in August 1963, when Martin Luther King Jr. made his I Have a Dream speech, as one speaker at the end of it said when walking away, "America's finally going to be America again." That's an overview of the liberal view of the 1960s. Now I'd like to bring our guest speaker number 2. So, and as I like to do in class, I would like literally invite another speaker, and I go, "Here he is." Okay. Try not to get too dizzy. Okay. So, as a conservative, the 60s was a time of moral backsliding, with disruption of family life and disruption of traditional values. Disrespect for authorities ranging from calling the police pigs to sacrilege of patriotism and religion, and the imposition of cumbersome regulations to hamstring business enterprises needed for generating wealth and jobs. Yes, the 1960s did produce rights for non-whites and women. That was important, but those past achievements should be honored without extensions into unreasonable and divisive demands. That's a conservative view of the 1960s. Okay, so jumping back into my own persona here as historian, now I'm gonna do a little interlude between past and present, also known as the 60s live. Okay, these different views of history also show up in different outlooks in life and society. Historians talk about individual and structural sources of change. Individual change, like how does change happen? By structures or because of individuals who are pushing change? Consider those two ideas for ways to address poverty, for example. What should we do about poverty? In general, conservatives tend to emphasize the role of individual choices, such as stirring people's beliefs or consciences to bestow individual acts of charity. That's an individual thing for the poor. By contrast, liberals tend to emphasize the role of structural conditions that create burdens on the poor, such as with laws and regulations for public goals to reduce inequality or improve environmental conditions. Now here's an example from the 1960s. Conservatives see the worst cases of segregation and its brutality as the fault of bad people. This tends to be a conservative, this is a generalization, but here, it's just for an overview. That conservatives tend to emphasize bad people, whereas liberals see the cruelty emerging from structures of racism in society and in people's assumptions. There's structures in society, but there's structures in our brains, in our heads. These outlooks continue today. For example, in 2023, Republican Governor Ron DeSantis tapped that individual way, he is a Republican, that individual way to explain racism when he went to Jacksonville to speak to a group after a man had murdered 3 African Americans. He called the murderer a major league scumbag. That's a focus on an individual crime, rather than describing him in relation to structural racism. So now I'm going to turn to the present, and because I'm old, I need my cues. So here goes. So I'm going to leap into the project's motivations, plans, and its supporters. Conservatives up to the 1960s have been restless about liberal reliance on government. I mean, that goes way back, decades of differences between Republicans and conservatives, but they generally cooperated up until the 1960s. And there's a whole history of that. We could talk more about that later in the Q&A, but the general cooperation sometimes is called consensus between Democrats and Republicans up to the 1960s. By contrast, now I'm turning to the present of Project 25. The Project 25 talks about needing to undo the damage, listen to the wording, this is a quote, the left has wrought in order to build a better country. So that's not the language of cooperation from older Republicans in relation to Democrats. In particular, the project exhibits conservative approaches since the 1960s, treating politics as more than politics. But it's a cultural movement. Republicans have taken that turn, especially after the 1960s. And so here's a line from the project. It's not enough for conservatives to win elections. That would be politics as politics, right? They see the need to rescue the country, listen to the language, rescue the country from the grip of the radical left. Now, these are policies that conservatives call socialists. This helps explain why that term keeps coming up. They call this socialist. They call their opponents socialists, while liberals call things like environmental protection, Social Security, Medicare, public purposes. They're not claiming socialism, and the conservatives look at the liberals as offering government overreach, and if you're leaning past what are conservative principles, many conservatives take anything away from that straight and narrow as socialist and associate it with socialism. Okay, another point. This conservatism has applied a name for these dangers in liberalism. The deep state. You probably heard this phrase used, the deep state. Actually, the term emerged with a congressional staffer named Mike Lofgren, who popularized the phrase deep state in 2014. There's a book of that name that he wrote, to describe the collaborations of both government and business to make the powerful still more powerful. He thought that was the deep state. That's what he talks about in that book. But it's not just liberals or conservatives. It's government supported by liberals and it's business supported by conservatives, both contributing to what he called the deep state of the powerful getting more powerful. He critiques both parties, not just liberals. But now Republicans have adopted this phrase to attribute this idea of a deep state only to liberals. Another aspect of the present with Project 25 is that they have the support of over 100 conservative organizations. I go back to my first point. They're seeking the ear of the next Republican president. He's trying to disown it, but they're seeking his ear. But a lot of groups are seeking his ear. That's what politicians do. Okay, now to the future. What implications for these policies, also known as what will your vote help produce? Project 25 has 4 parts, or pillars, as they call them. We'll see more about that in the video in just a minute. To pave the way for an effective conservative administration. So they are real briefly. Policy, agenda, personnel suggestions, like a Rolodex, to use an old term, their training, and a 180-day playbook, what to do. The current project builds on the Heritage Foundations, remember they're the ones who wrote it, their long-standing mandate for leadership, which they've been doing for years. So this is not the first time. Most recently, the Trump administration, when Trump was in office, starting in 2017, relied heavily on the Heritage Foundation's mandate of that election season for policy guidance, embracing about 2/3 of its proposals in the first year. Even earlier, so that was 2017, even earlier, the first mandate for leadership, when did the Heritage Foundation start doing this? January 1981. And it contained policy proposals to make government more efficient and effective, according to their norms, their standards. President Ronald Reagan distributed the Heritage Foundation's first book, the first of these mandates, at his first cabinet meeting in 1981. Now, similarly, the Heritage Foundation observed in 2018, after the Trump administration had used many of their proposals, they said, quote, "He has embraced the comprehensive recommendations made in the mandate for leadership of that year, produced during the 2016 campaign." So they said this in 18, saying, yes, this is what has happened in 2018. So with enthusiasm for Trump, they were proud to have contributed to his achievements in economic growth, this is a quotation from those years, a stronger national defense, and a restoration of the rule of law. Also, going to the present mandate, the Project 25 that we're currently focused on here, Republican vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance wrote the introduction to the current Project 25. So in closing then, for my opening thoughts here, I'm going to offer a sample from one chapter which I was particularly interested in, the chapter on the environment. So this may be a little bit of spoiler alert for what Wendy Anderson will be talking about. It reflects the conservative fair use approach to the environment. Now, for fair use, that's a term that conservatives use for their approach to the environment. They often resent liberals saying that liberals are environmentalists, but conservatives aren't. So they say, we're environmentalists too, but we believe in fair use. Now, if you're interested, I brought a sample book back there and a poster we invited the author of the book, Terry Anderson, to campus years ago, and he's got an organization called Property and Environmental Research Council, or PERC, P-E-R-C. So here's the fair use approach, which I saw shot all through this chapter. It looked like the fair use approach. Its advocates argue that nature will be healthier when held by private owners, because the owners of private property care the most about their own land and water. And owners will devote their profits toward preserving natural resources for their continued use and their continued profit. This outlook shows a few themes about conservative approaches to the environment. And I pick out 3 that I noticed in this chapter. One is a great trust in business. The trusting business. The author of the chapter 13 of this project, Mandy Gunas-Akera, says that the EPA, under the future administration, needs to, quote, maintain earnest relationship with business. This includes balancing protections with profits and relying on surpluses from economic development to pay for protections. Protections cost. How are you going to pay for it? From profits. Where are you going to get profits? From having business being profitable. To which the liberals say, well, that's why we have problems. But I'm speaking from the point of view of conservatives here. That they're focused on keeping profits. So they call renewals unreliable, and they call restrictions job killing that depress the economy. Second point, they rely on states, not national governments, with shades of some American history there. And the project rejects the liberal arguments that sometimes the self-interest of business needs to be corralled by government. And a third point, I'll close with this one, that liberals, in this chapter there's an emphasis that liberals exaggerate nature's ill health in pursuit, and here's a quote from the chapter, in pursuit of global climate-themed agenda designed to scare the American public into accepting their ineffective, liberty-crushing regulations with diminished private property rights and exorbitant costs. So now we're going to turn to a video which will take on a couple of characteristics. First, we're going to see a section of video that provides an overview of what it is. It's an educational organization that produced this. And the second will have some primary sources. That's a history term. We'll have people from the present talking about why they dislike Project 25 and why they like Project 25. So let's turn to the video.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. This first part has an overview.
Sit down. We can't see because your shadow's over the.
We're not
showing it yet. The volume.
Yeah. So the first part, first half, it's about 8 minutes for this section. It will present a person handwriting very quickly, and then speaking over it about the 4 pillars mentioned. And then the second half will show reasons why liberals criticize it. And then we're going to get into a video section that shows people from the present articulating why they favor it and why they disagree with it. And there it is.
Hey, it's Dan Zimmerman. Welcome back to Illustrate History. In this video, we'll dive into everything you need to know about Project 2025, including 5 criticisms. Remember, if you disagree with Project 2025 or its criticisms, please don't dislike the video, but instead respectfully comment your thoughts below. Project 2025, led by the
Give us just a second.
You know, it's not really a professional event if we don't have technological problems. This is just a show of authenticity.
The microphone. Yes, the microphone. You turn the microphone off? No, let's try
And somebody had one for Paul. Paul, the question is, are you hopeful for the country in terms of, regardless of what happens after the election? And democracy.
An easy one.
I guess I think it's a mistake to put too much hope in an election as if it's going to save us and transform everything, and the person you vote for is going to be the best that since sliced bread and correct everything. I hope for improvements rather than for any absolute transformation from either side. So I have my own leanings, you have your own leanings. I just tend to be cautious about expecting that any one approach will solve everything. Now I'm going to try to solve my phone.
One of the things that we're doing to try and solve this problem is that the IT people from the library are coming forward to try and fix the problem. In the meantime, one of the things I'm wondering is whether or not it might be a good idea to go ahead and present some of your questions to some of these panelists. Okay, this first one is going to be for our education specialist, as it were. You may not know that's who you are. What effect will eliminating the Federal Department of Education have on our children's ability to compete in on the world stage? One of the proposals of 2025 is, you may not be aware, is to disassemble the Department of Education.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Well, shall I stand? Yes. So the question here is about the consequences of terminating the Department of Education. As many of you know, the Department of Education is primarily not so much funding your school, but funding programs that help a variety of constituents, students that benefit from Pell Grants, for instance, Title Is, and other different kind of project that schools receive via different funding than state, local, and state mandates. So by and large, abolishing the Department of Education would not change how the school is funded, but what it would change is those additional programs. After school programs, Pell Grant that enables students to choose. It is quite not clear in the Project 2025 what the role of vouchers would be. One can surmise from the text that the role of voucher would be increased for that. The second part of the question is, what is the consequence on American students competing on the world stage? In fact, this is a very important question because this is one of the reasons that the writers of Project 2025 have given to abolish the Department of Education. It's quite simply, it hasn't done the job that it was supposed to do. The math scores, which can be criticized as such, have not risen as much, and American students usually sit in the top 30 percentiles of the rankings. So usually American students are number 29, 30, number 31, which is not that great. The question becomes, if you remove some of the after-school programs, what will happen to the students? And I would like to use this opportunity, perhaps, I'm going to play a little bit of the devil's advocate here, because it's a nice exercise. What would happen if that is actually the case? What can we do? And I am more concerned about what can we do if that is the case than, oh my gosh, something terrible is going to happen. And what we can do is already be on the lookout for funding that can come to our school to help our students compete on the world stage. There is a lot of programs that are not currently taken enough advantage of. And this is currently impeding schools from training the students the way they are supposed to be trained, such as mathematics, but also reading books. We are in the library here. I read recently that no matter where you are at universities, whether it be Harvard, whether it be Stetson, pretty much 90% of the students coming to college have not read one single book cover to cover. My concern is how to change this rather than immediately focusing on, of course, something that sounds alarming, which is the abolition of the Department of Education. If you go into details, however, the project would take, if that were to be implemented, 10 years. Between the time the project would reach the president's desk to abolish the Department of Education, and not accounting for the immense complexity of not doing so, up to the point where the Department of Education would no longer be existing, it would take, according to Project 2025, 10 years. Which gives us 10 years to figure out how to deal with that issue. So this is an important part that we have to play. Namely, what programs do exist that we have to tap into in order to make sure our students read books such as the one that are in this wonderful library. What are the programs that we can tap into so that our students are trained in the basic mathematics that they have to do before they reach college age? This is partially the goal of the Department of Education, but it is also the responsibility of many programs that remain untapped for as it is. So the abolition of the Department of Education would certainly be detrimental to most of the schools that do not have enough resources to apply, for instance, for those grants. There is a wonderful program here at Stetson called the Bonner Program, where our students do help in this very library, those public organizations such as the library, but also after schools program and public schools, to apply to programs that can help. This may not be the most wonderful structured and structural solution, but it is one. Schools are currently underfunded, and they do not have the resources to help students getting the help they need. They are literally short-staffed. If that were to happen, we have 10 years to figure it out, and 10 years to get our students back to speed. That's what I would answer. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Our next question is an environmental question.
Can I just try this one?
Yes,
Hey, Dan Zimmerman, welcome back.
not yet. Okay. I'm sorry?
Back to the question.
Yes, back to the question. Why does the 2025 project want to eliminate NOAA, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration? Wouldn't it hurt our ability to prepare for natural disasters like hurricanes and fires? And for this, Dr. Wendy Anderson.
Thank you. I don't know who made that question, but that was actually where I was going to start. So, like, yes, let's do that one first. How many of you experienced a hurricane last week? How many of you knew it was coming? Okay, isn't that great? Okay, right. So preparing is how we save lives with our major weather events, whether that's a hurricane in Florida or tornadoes in Florida or anywhere else, wildfires, anything. It's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration that houses the National Weather Service, that which has a subsidiary within it, the National Hurricane Center, amongst other things. NOAA also includes the National Marine Fisheries Service, so if you happen to like to eat fish, it's regulated by that. The National Ocean Service, which is about shipping, National Environmental Satellite Data and Information Service, which tells us a whole bunch of stuff about the Earth, and aviation, marine and aviation services. Okay, these are things that kind of keep the world going, so at least keep the nation going. I can't answer the why question. Why do they want to eliminate it? They want to eliminate a lot of what Dr. Croce called the deep state. So, which by which they're defining that as, really doing away with a lot of the civil servants and the offices and divisions of our big departments that basically run the daily operations of the government. And so, how many of you drove here on a road? How many of you are sitting in a public building right now for a public gathering? Okay, like, is all of this the deep state? I mean, I don't know, I don't even know what that phrase really means. I mean, we depend every minute of every day on services provided by the government, including forecasting our weather and, and helping us stay safe through doing that. So yeah, I don't know why they would want to do it other than, actually I'll read you the language from chapter 21, page 664. I actually quoted this here. The National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration should be dismantled and many of its functions eliminated, sent to other agencies, privatized, or placed under the control of states and territories. Okay, back up 2 weeks. Hurricane Helene. How many states did Hurricane Helene cross? 6. Okay, so let's say that we had a weather service for just Florida. Would North Carolina have gotten the memo? No, probably not. So, there are certain things that the federal government needs to control because they are multi-state things, right? Like weather. Weather does not follow political boundaries. We could privatize it, but when you privatize something, you're putting it in the hands of an organization that is aiming to either make a profit on it. So Weather Channel, we can, that's great. So, basically what we need is, I would call this a core government function. Paying attention to the weather and to our climate is a core government function that we need to maintain. I have lots more to say about this, but I think I'm gonna stop there. And you can ask me some other questions later because I've got like 2 whole pages of things I'd love to talk about. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, we have a question now. Let's check in with the tech people. Still good? Okay, we're on our way with that. This is concerning health.
Everything you need to know about Project 2025, including 5 criticisms. Remember,
This concerning medical stuff. What is the fundamental criteria for the stance on abortion? What are the values that drive this stance? This is for Jennifer.
Thank you. So Project 2025, as everybody probably already knows, when conservatives talk about abortion, the main thing that they are concerned about is the life of the mother and then the health of the child. With Project 2025, it breaks down the reasons why people might need abortions into a few different reasons. One of them are intentionally induced abortions, another is incidental abortions, and then there's also miscarriages. So the one that Project 2025 is mostly concerned with are the induced abortions and then the incidental. We might have seen the TV commercial where the lady talks about the fact that she had a brain tumor and she also was pregnant. According to Project 2025, her life is not in immediate danger, so she would probably not qualify with the criteria that they have. Another policy with regard to Project 2025 is there'll be a federal database that will manage basically everybody's pregnancies, and the states will be required to share. So in that way, you can be monitored to make sure that you're doing the best for your baby and make sure that you're not making any accidental mistakes that might cause a miscarriage or that could be deemed as an abortion. And then there's gonna be an overarching new department that will make sure that these policies are enacted. And this new department will also be in charge of female needs and will be female health needs. And it will also be in charge of making sure that families and their needs are taken care of. And while this sounds really, really good on the outset, when you think about the fact that this is placing the state in charge of your decisions for healthcare and essentially making your doctor criminally liable for things that he or she might decide are necessary for your health, it's kind of scary. I had a friend not too long ago, a couple years ago, she found herself to be pregnant. She was probably in her, maybe, I don't know, 2-3 months along, and she discovered that she had breast cancer, and she didn't have any radiation, and unfortunately she passed away. It was her choice, and that's what she chose to do, but it would be nice if every single woman could make that choice for themselves. So when we're looking at implementing these new policies by Project 2025, there will be an overarching federal program that will make sure that everybody's family is running accordance to basically biblical principles is what it states, which is also a little bit nerve-wracking if you don't find yourself following the same brand of Christianity that they do, so.
I have a question I'd like
Yes.
to ask. Is there any provision in the project for the care of the millions of children that will be born who will never develop normally or ever be able to take care of themselves, that would have been aborted through an amniocentesis or something?
That is an excellent question. That was one of the things that I was looking for when I was going through those many pages when it comes to healthcare. Oh, I'm sorry.
She didn't have a microphone?
No.
Sure. She asked, is there any provision in the policies for all of the children who would have, under normal circumstances, maybe their parents might have sought an abortion because they weren't viable or they were gonna have such developmental issues that they won't be able to take care of themselves or just not live normal lives. I looked for that when I was reading, and there's nothing there. Quite the opposite. If you read Project 2025, things that are gonna be on the chopping block are like temporary assistance and for needy families, pre-K, all of those kind of things that you need to help your child have a smooth development, and the government has shown has decreased poverty rates by about 23% are on the chopping block. So no, there is nothing there. There's nothing, there's no increase of money to help with orphanages or parents who are gonna need additional funds to take care of those children. No, there's nothing there, unfortunately.
That is, again, concerning education. Does the Trump administration give us the right to educate our children in the way we see fit?
So this is an interesting question. I am not a Trump spokesperson, so I couldn't possibly know what would it be. I would say, however, that the giving back. I'm not sure if one should say giving back, but giving those decisions to the state, I'm still kind of confused as to what it means. Whether that gives you the right to have an education, as you say, fit for your students, that also I'm not quite sure what would that mean. The programs that your children see at school, to an extent, are introducing children to what they might not otherwise have access to. I see schools as a place where students can have the opportunity to learn what they cannot possibly learn at home. That is what I consider the goal of education, putting you in front of that which you do not know. If that is the view of a parent who sees fit their children to access education that they cannot possibly give their children, then one would be forced to answer yes. If on the other hand, for parents, education that they see fit is making sure that their children receive exactly the education that they want their child to receive, that is not quite the goal of education. Again, the goal of education is making sure that you get access to that which you do not know. Whether giving it back to the states is the solution, or whether this is quite the opposite, the impediment, I think that is the question to be asked. I am grateful for that to be a question. I'm grateful that we can converse on what is the best way to make sure that education does not simply reproduce what we want, but gives in front of us that which we do not know. I think this is the only way to get our eyes open, the only way to get pushed to the frontiers of what we know. And that starts from a very young age. Whatever gets us there, I'm not sure whether giving back to the state and giving that out of the federal legislation is concerned is the way. I'm not also sure that all parents would agree. So I will leave it there.
2025, led by the Heritage Foundation, is a comprehensive initiative designed to prepare for a potential conservative administration starting in January 2025. It is structured around four main pillars: policy development, personnel recruitment, training, and strategic planning for the early days of the new administration. Here's a more detailed breakdown of each component. First, let's look at the policy agenda. The Conservative Promise is a detailed policy guide that provides specific recommendations for governing major federal agencies. The guide encompasses conservative solutions to various issues, including economic policies, healthcare, education, and national security. It is intended to serve as a blueprint for the next conservative administration, ensuring that key conservative values and strategies are implemented effectively from the outset. The second pillar is the personnel database. Project 2025 includes a comprehensive personnel database aimed at identifying and vetting potential appointees for various positions within the federal government. This database seeks to ensure that a future conservative administration has a pool of qualified, ideologically aligned individuals ready to fill key roles. The recruitment efforts span across different sectors and backgrounds, targeting experienced professionals who can execute the administration's agenda efficiently. The third part is the training through the Presidential Administration Academy. To prepare the identified personnel for their roles, Project 2025 has established the Presidential Administration Academy. This academy offers a range of training programs including workshops, seminars, online courses, and mentorship from former administration officials. The training is designed to equip future administrators with the necessary skills and knowledge to implement conservative policies effectively. Fourth is the 180-day playbook. The 180-day playbook is a strategic document outlining the immediate actions to be taken by the new administration within the first 180 days. This playbook is crafted to enable swift policy reversals and the implementation of conservative priorities, ensuring a smooth and impactful start. It includes specific actions for various departments and agencies, focusing on undoing the policies of the previous administration and setting the stage for long-term conservative governance. Now let's talk about the coalition and organizational structure. Project 2025 is supported by a coalition of over 100 conservative organizations, including think tanks, advocacy groups, and academic institutions. This broad coalition brings together diverse expertise and resources to support the project's goals. Notable participants include former officials from the Trump administration who contribute their experience and insights to the project. There are specific policy focus areas in Project 2025. Project 2025 proposes significant changes to federal policies on reproductive health. These include removing references to abortion from federal laws and regulations, reversing the approval of abortion pills, and defunding clinics that provide abortion or contraception services. The initiative also aims to reinstate the Comstock Act to ban mail-order abortions and reshape Medicaid to avoid funding reproductive health care services that include abortion. Another focus area is cultural and social issues. The project emphasizes the restoration of traditional family values and religious principles. This includes opposing policies perceived as supporting cultural Marxism and promoting a pro-life agenda. It advocates for policies that support the nuclear family, religious liberty, and traditional gender roles. There's also the leadership of Project 2025, which is directed by Paul Dans, a former chief of staff at the Office of Personnel Management during the Trump administration, with Spencer Sherteen serving as associate director. Both bring extensive experience from their previous roles in government, contributing to the strategic planning and execution of the project. So what are the criticisms of Project 2025? Project 2025 has sparked significant criticism from various sources. Critics argue that the project embodies a comprehensive plan to centralize executive power, erode democratic norms, and enforce a far-right agenda on American governance and society. Let's take a look at 5 specific criticisms in more detail. First is the centralization of executive power. One major criticism is that Project 2025 seeks to expand presidential control over the federal bureaucracy. The plan includes reviving the Schedule F classification, which would allow the president to replace thousands of civil service employees with political appointees loyal to the administration. Critics argue this would undermine the nonpartisan nature of the civil service and politicize federal agencies, making them tools of the executive branch rather than independent entities. Second is the attack on democratic institutions. Critics highlight that Project 2025's blueprint includes proposals to dismantle or weaken key democratic institutions. This includes plans to defund the Department of Justice and dismantle the FBI and other agencies that could act as checks on presidential power. Such moves are seen as efforts to undermine the rule of law and enable the executive branch to operate with little oversight or accountability. Third, the project also faces criticism for its potential use of government power to target political opponents and critics. There are fears that it would enable the executive to pursue legal action against political adversaries and critical media outlets, drawing parallels to authoritarian regimes where dissent is suppressed through state mechanisms. The fourth criticism is the social and cultural agenda. Project 2025's policy agenda includes strong positions on social issues, promoting conservative values that critics argue could roll back rights and protections for various groups. The document outlines plans to restrict LGBTQ+ rights, enforce strict anti-abortion measures, and integrate Christian nationalist principles into government policy. This agenda has raised concerns about the erosion of civil liberties and the imposition of a particular religious and ideological framework on the entire nation. Lastly is the environmental and climate policy rollbacks. The project's stance on environmental regulations is contentious. It proposes significant rollbacks of climate policies which critics argue would have detrimental effects on efforts to combat climate change and protect the environment. This aspect of the plan is seen as catering to business interests at the expense of long-term ecological sustainability. Did you find this video about Project 2025 to be helpful? Remember not to dislike the video, but rather like the video, comment.
These guys against. These are congressmen.
5 would roll back our fundamental freedoms, undermine our democracy, and gut checks and balances.
Here's a closer look at the 4 main pillars of this radical plan and how they could transform the American government as we know it.
One of the things that's interesting about Project 2025 is the tone. You hear the term woke mentioned dozens of times, radical mentioned dozens of times. It's remarkably driven by culture war politics.
Project 2025 is designed as a government in waiting if Trump or any conservative president returns to office. It's the brainchild of the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank and lobbying group that has helped staff Republican administrations since the Reagan era.
We cover literally every public policy issue in Project 2025, from domestic policy to foreign policy.
Kevin Roberts is the president of the Heritage Foundation and one of the driving forces behind the project.
All Project 2025 is trying to do is to be a corrective to the liberal nonsense that has been so insidious inside the executive branch for the last half century. Are at the head of Project 2025. It is a political calculation that he's making because he recognizes that the American people do not support this extremist agenda. President Trump is trying to win a presidential campaign, and we understand that he has to make political considerations. Given the millions of dollars that the left has spent attacking Project 2025 because they have nothing else to run on, I wasn't surprised to see President Trump's statement, nor are there any hard feelings.
Back in 2022, Trump spoke to the Heritage Foundation and was direct about its role in crafting future policy.
This is a great group, and they're gonna lay the groundwork and detail plans for exactly what our movement will do and what your movement will do when the American people give us a colossal mandate to save America, and that's coming.
Trump's own policy platform closely resembles many of Project 2025's proposals too, from cracking down on immigration to blocking gender-affirming healthcare and stopping a woke and weaponized government.
Given the persuasiveness of these ideas, the overlap that exists between Trump's stated priorities and the priorities of the project, that will all sort itself out. It really is the conservative playbook, not just for the next year or two, but hopefully for the next generation.
Yes, it is. Okay, we have questions from people concerned about some environmental issues, and so Dr. Anderson, would you respond?
Sure. So this one is really more focused on, at least the way it's written, is more focused on state issues. But I'm going to start here and kind of jump off to some federal things. So this person writes, I swim and picnic at Blue Springs and DeLeon Springs. What will happen if Florida parks and happen to Florida parks if the government seizes public lands and parks? So again, that's kind of state focused, and I know that most of us were paying attention a month ago when there was a lot of discussion about the possibility of bringing in more concessionaires with more lodges and golf courses and stuff in our state parks, and I know there was a kind of a bipartisan pushback on that, and for that, I think we can all be relieved. For now, it will come back. But kind of using that as a model for also looking at the possibility of our federal public lands being, if not privatized, at least opened up for a lot more activity from, say, fossil fuel mining and things like that. We really need to think about that. So Project 2025 proposes repealing the Antiquities Act, and the Antiquities Act, amongst many other things, establishes and protects national monuments and would open protected public lands to more mineral extraction and other development. So, this includes our the national monuments includes a lot of the public lands out west, like Grand Escalante, the Red Rocks region of southern Utah. A lot of those areas would be opened up to natural gas and oil extraction. A lot of the BLM lands, Bureau of Land Management lands out west, which are currently used for mining and for grazing, more of those would be opened. Some of those would even be opened up for perhaps, I think they've said affordable housing development. I mean, it's out in the middle of nowhere, and I don't know where those people are gonna go work, but so anyway, the Antiquities Act is something that protects millions of acres of public land that I like to kind of remind everybody, like, we all own that. We collectively own that as citizens of this nation. So there's that. I also think that, related to that, the opening up, and this was another related question, if I can kind of go on to the question about our gas and fossil fuel companies and or big pharma contributors to the Heritage Foundation. To be honest, I haven't really reviewed the donor portfolio for the Heritage Foundation because I just have other things to do. But But one of the things I want to say about big oil is that, and I'm trying to think about how to frame this.
I can answer that question.
Okay, yes.
The donors are ExxonMobil.
Okay. Very good, thank you, Patty. Okay, yes, of course they do. I'm gonna say something in the other direction though. So, let's talk about climate change. How many of you understand that climate change, the denial rhetoric about climate change was funded by big oil, you know, over the last 30, 40 years. I mean, the big oil companies were like, we do not, you know, want to have this conversation. We don't want any of our rights or our profits affected by conversations or regulations about climate change. So we all understand that. I think that's pretty well known. But the tide has changed, actually. And even though they may still be contributing to the Heritage Foundation and other conservative initiatives, most of the big oil companies, including ExxonMobil and Chevron and BP and Shell and all those, they all accept and acknowledge that climate change is real now. And you know, they do. They're like, oh yeah, it's happening. We know it's happening. You go to any of those companies' websites, they've got a whole section in there about climate change and renewable energy. And yet their story now is that, oh, but you know, we're not gonna be able to sort of wean ourselves off of oil for at least 30 more years. So we need to keep all the subsidies coming to keep big oil kind of, you know, operating at the level that it's been operating at, because we have a society and an economy to run. So anyway, they're trying to kind of play it both ways right now. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're also donating to, you know, some more liberal initiatives as well, just to kind of keep everybody happy. I'm just guessing. Again, I don't really pay attention to their donor activities. But anyway, another thing from Project 2025 is that there is an intention to expand oil and gas exploration and extraction, including adding more major pipelines and opening up, again, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and Minnesota's Boundary Waters Wilderness. Has anybody ever paddled in the Boundary Waters? Yes. Delightful place, right? So this is something that we would have to watch out for, because as much as energy independence is a thing that I think all of us would desire, it doesn't have to be dirty energy. And we certainly want to make sure that we're not taking out beautiful public lands that do all sorts of other amazing things for us, including stimulating the economy from tourism and protecting endangered species and other creatures along the way. So I, again, will maybe pause there. Do you want me to keep going through other questions or pass it on to others?
Pass this
Okay.
on. Thank you so much. Okay, we have a question concerning Medicaid, Medicare. What will happen?
Yeah, there were a couple of questions about Medicaid and Medicare. Apparently everybody really cares about staying healthy. Surprise, surprise, right? So the Project 2025 plan, one of the things it wants to do is make Medicare Advantage the default rather than Medicare. Project 2025 touts how it can be potentially less expensive if you can find someone to take care of you in plan and make you automatically enrolled. That seems cool. I mean, a lot of people have Medicare Advantage and really like it. Some of the drawbacks though are Medicare covers everything. So there are a lot of people who might not be able to afford healthcare, and that will change. It also talks about overconsumption being a problem with Medicare. So what the proposal offers is that the healthcare will be income-based, right? And then it also uses a lot of wording that talks about incentivizing personal responsibility. So it doesn't ever say what that means, but it does say that your healthcare is your responsibility, and that we should all be more in charge of our own health and making sure that we're well. It will also put in work requirements. There'll be it talks a lot about having a minimum of 30 hours per week for people who are receiving federal benefits. And that's just not Medicare, Medicaid, it's across. That's pretty much everything. They want you to work 30 hours a week minimum. And then also there will be, of course, removal for care for people who are seeking help for their transitions if they're LGBTQ+, and then also no abortion care at all. Abortions will only be allowed if they're literally to save the life of the mother. So once again, if you're someone who needs an abortion because you're having a difficulty health-wise, that's not allowed. The primary purpose of the 2025 health plan is to make sure that the health of the child is prioritized over everything. So those are the big things. Basically, it will become more expensive for most of us. There will be income-based requirements, and then we will not be seeing help for people who are transitioning or having care as a part of their LGBTQ+ walk. And yeah, it will be different. It will be very different.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, we have a question for Dr. Croce. Would you like to address the first one?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. So one. Yeah.
That's for you.
Thank you.
And if you don't mind, would you mind going up to the podium?
Sure.
Thank you.
I'll bring my scribblies up there because I was taking notes on things I heard, and I think there's some contextual points that might be helpful for others to hear about too. One is here's a question about: does the Trump plan make sure that the economy improves by producing more oil and by increasing tariffs? So the first point about oil actually ties in with Wendy's observation about the oil companies emphasizing that their goods are providing a transition fuel. They like the word transition. And a lot of that hinges on just how bad is the environment, what kind of shape is it in. So if the oil companies seem to be putting a big emphasis that it's not that bad, as with the comment that I quoted from chapter 13, that the liberals are out to scare people, they're exaggerating, and therefore we have time for a transition, decades of transition. So many observers, not just political liberals, but scientists say we may not have enough time for that. So it's a good question from the point of view of the economy, but from the point of view of the environment, I'm not sure there's enough time for the improvements to the economy that increased oil production would create, the question asked for. The other part of the question was about increasing tariffs, which I understand is something that an administration can't ask other countries to pay for. And so therefore it could generate, it seems almost definite to generate higher prices. So that's a surprising one for a Republican to be emphasizing, because it seems like it would bring more inflation. That's not in Project 25, that's in Trump's stump speeches. And another thing I noticed is that, let's see if I can find it, that on the last thing that, one of the last things we heard from Wendy speaking just a few seconds ago is that, from Jennifer speaking just a few seconds ago about medical emphasis in Project 25 on personal responsibility. And it reminded me of something that Johan had said about conservatives and their approach to the classroom, the experts in the classroom. And I noticed a theme running across those that notice how in both cases the conservatives are emphasizing distrust of experts. So whether they're teachers or whether they're medical professionals. So the personal responsibility is showing an emphasis on turning away from medical experts, and the education comments show that conservatives want to tilt power, these are my observations, they want to tilt power to parents away from teachers. And there's another example of a distrust of expertise. Okay, so why don't I pause there, leaving time for others.
Thank you so much. We have another environmental question. I'm going to ask one more time for Dr. Anderson to come forward and to introduce a special guest that she has seen at the back of the room.
Okay, so I I'm very uncomfortable with this question because I don't know my audience here. I mean, I know many of you, but I understand this is, this is an audience representing our full spectrum of our community. And so the question somebody is asking me is, who are you voting for as an environmentalist and why? And voting is private, and I will tell this to anybody who you vote for is between you and your ballot in the voting booth or in the privacy of your kitchen if you have a mail-in ballot. But I will tell you, number one, I'm voting for Rosemary Latham. She is running for Florida House District 29, which is DeLand, Lake Helen, and Deltona, Osteen area. She's standing in the back of the room. She's hiding behind Andrew Roush. Just came from work probably. She's a nurse practitioner, and so if I'm going to answer the question fully as Rosemary's coming forward. But if we end up with a Republican administration, one of the things they have said is they will give a lot more power back to the states. And if we're going to have a lot more power coming back to the state legislature, we better have good people in the state legislature. And so these races really matter. We need people, and I sat with Rosemary last night for 6.5 hours at the county council meeting. The first 2 hours of that meeting were people coming from all over the county sharing their experience with Hurricane Milton, with their homes being flooded, with losing everything, losing their retirement, everything because of flooding. And I sat next to Rosemary. Rosemary, we actually got a little teared up together because I said, Rosemary, this is why we have to send you to Tallahassee, because I know one of your number one top priorities is going to be addressing the flood issues and trying to help communities address that through better policies for land development and so one of the things the state legislature has done is kind of cut municipal governments off at the knees, so they can't really have stronger policies about building and development. So anyway, I just wanted to introduce Rosemary. I don't know if she has anything she'd like to say to you for like half a second or anything, but and not to put you on the spot, but you're a politician now, so you're supposed to be able to do this.
Hi everybody, Rosemary Latham. Sorry I was late. Yes, I do still work the job that pays the bills. But no, I'm so pleased to see this group here and this esteemed panel of wonderful, educated people who I rely on for their expertise. And that's how I will function when I get to Tallahassee. Any politician or anyone running for office who says they have all the answers, like I've said from the beginning, run far, run fast, because you don't want to trust that person. I have learned so much since I have started this process, and it's been extremely humbling. But what I have learned the most is to surround myself by people who know what they're talking about. And that's how we are going to find solutions. As Wendy said, we sat at the city commission meeting yesterday, county council, I've been to too many meetings, county council meeting last night for 2 solid hours, and people had 3 minutes to talk about how this storm has affected their lives. Now I'm gonna tell you, a simple story. JC Figueredo, who owns JC's Bikes and Boards, who is a businessman, he has been flooded for 6 years. Personally, JC bought his property from my late husband, who owned that property for 40 years and never had standing water on that property. 40 years. And now JC bought the land in 2016 from my husband. He built a house, raised his family, and a year later he's underwater. Why? Because Victoria Park built out there. That's the reason. So tell me why, after 40 years of having dry property, what's the difference? Victoria and the development. So I am relying on Wendy and smart people like her, and I promise JC that if I make it to Tallahassee, or when I make it to Tallahassee, this is going to be a priority, because not only is it DeLand, it's Deltona, it's Orange City, Port Orange. Everyone is suffering because of the development and the lack of planning. I went down Taylor Road today trying to get to work. And there is a house right south of Sawyer Landing that's underwater. Sawyer Landing's high and dry. This house is underwater. Why? Because Sawyer Landing was built up. People who have lived in that house long before Sawyer Landing are flooded out because of it. So anyway, I appreciate your support. I hope that you truly will vote for me, and please trust that I will go to Tallahassee with the best intention of representing the people of this district and what is important for everyone in this district, and I will be accessible. And that's something that I promise all of you. So thanks for your time.
It wasn't supposed to be a political event today, but somebody asked me the question. I'll answer the rest of it, and one of these is going to be really controversial, and I've already gotten some pushback on it, so just like, I'm sorry. But for county chair, I'm voting for Jeff Brower, because I'm just going to say, I don't agree with Jeff on a lot of things, and he has said and done some things that have made me just cringe bad. But I'm going to tell you, when I'm, as an environmentalist, I need somebody sitting in that center seat on the county council who is going to defend the environment and defend the people of this county who are suffering from misuse of our environment. And so I'm sticking with Jeff. And then yeah, I'm voting for Kamala Harris. I am, because I believe that she has the right policies that are going to protect the environment. I think that she is going to make sure that we still have an EPA. I'm gonna go to my notes now. I'm gonna take her to this meeting. So I got a bunch of things I wanted to say. So quick question. This is how I teach my classes. What does the EPA stand for? Somebody just call it out.
Environment.
Okay. Now here's the trick question. What does the EPA protect? Wrong. The EPA protects people. We should call it the PPA, except that would sound silly. So most of what the EPA does is actually determine what level of pollutants you can be exposed to before you have adverse effects. And so how many of you like to drink water that has lead in it? No. How many of you, oh, there's a guy in the back, he thinks that's cool. How many of you like the idea of maybe having to wade through raw sewage to get out of your driveway in the middle of a storm? Okay, there are people in this county who are having to do that right now. Public health nightmare right now. It's the EPA that makes sure that we have laws that ensure that we have clean water, not just coming out of our taps, but clean water in the environment. The EPA is regulating clean air. The EPA is doing all sorts of things to keep us healthy. So we don't want to lose that. And anyway, I actually could go on for hours I want, because Patty will be very unhappy with me. Anyway, I'm sticking with Harris, and I'm sticking with Harris. She's already there. But also because the second part of the question is, am I scared? I don't scare easily. I really don't. I don't intimidate easily. I don't scare easily. But I'm a little scared. I think all of us need an exit plan. But I did just move out of Victoria Park, by the way. I'm no longer part of the problem, and I moved to an undisclosed location. And so no, I'm not scared. But I do think that we have as citizens every obligation to stay involved and to make sure that whoever is running our county or our city or our state or the federal government is hearing us and is responding to us and serving us.
Okay, just 1 second. Rosemary has requested one quick
thing. When Wendy said, are we scared? What I implored and what I talked to people, because so many people have come up and spoken with me, I said, take that fear, take that concern, take that hand-wringing and turn it into action. Because then you're not a victim, then you are actively doing something to fix the problem, and it will empower you. and it will make you feel better. So if there's one thing I can tell you guys to do, if you're getting to the hand-wringing stage and the rocking back and forth stage, do something. Make a phone call. Go make sure people are out to vote. Be a poll watcher. Be a greeter at the precincts. Do something, because your activity and your getting out there will make you feel better and make you feel like you're doing something.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. We're running out of time, but I know I'd like to go over, but we can't. We've only got the room a certain period of time. We have an important question that is directed to Jennifer. Why do liberals insist on subsidizing LGBTQ surgeries, especially children? So somewhere in this room, someone asked this question, and so Jennifer's going to respond.
Sure. So what liberals are mostly concerned with is making sure that people have proper health care. If a parent decides that their child needs a certain procedure and their doctor agrees, then the child should probably have that. The same would apply with the diet that the child has. If a parent decides that the child is going to be vegan or vegetarian, that's between them and their healthcare provider. If a parent decides that a child needs to be homeschooled instead of going to a regular school or go to a charter school, that should be between the parent and their child. If a parent decides pretty much anything, the books that they're going to read in this library, that should be between the parent, the child, and maybe a religious advisor. So it's not that liberals want to force anything on anyone. Liberals, I should say liberals, but the majority of people, I'm going to say the majority of people, want to make sure that we get to determine our own future. We're responsible for determining our future for ourselves and our children, with the help of whoever we choose to be our spiritual advisor, if we have one, and our healthcare, our doctors. And that's where I myself think the decision should lie, not with the state to tell me what I can and cannot do for my child.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. Dr. Croce has something briefly that he would like to add, and then we're going to have to wrap up.
Okay, that sounds good. Okay. Well, ginspired by Rosemary Latham's comment at the end about taking action, another action to take is to listen to someone who disagrees with you. Because after all, if there's any chance for either party to win, there's going to have to be some degree of persuasion. And I'm reminded of another story that relates to something you said about Jeff Brower when he was first running, the first time he entered office. I ran into him in Artisan Alley, and I knew he was a Republican. I mean, I hope that's not like, I think that's public knowledge, right? He's a Republican. Yeah. And I said, you're presenting yourself as an environmentalist. Isn't that hard with an area that is maybe purple, if not red, in this area? And he said, if I were to bring up national issues and you mention Al Gore, the Republicans would be down my throat. But if I talk to my fellow Republicans and I talk about water or fishing, I get a better response from them. And I was struck in hearing your comment that reminded me of the old phrase that all politics is local. Well, that goes double for environmental politics. And a lot of what you both said referred to very local issues. So we started this session by looking at national issues and P25 and all of these stuff, but we're sort of ending it by looking at local issues. And all of it's important, but all of them call for listening to each other, because then we might be able to prevent fighting, and we might have a better outcome in November, no matter who wins.
Thank you so much. Our time for today has run out. I'm so inspired to see all of you here. I so thank you for coming out this afternoon. One of the things that I would just like to add is that I heard it said that we get the government that we deserve. And my personal experience is recognizing that I have been asleep at the switch for a lot of years. And from this point on, I plan to be as active as I can be. And I hope all of you will as well. Thank you so much for coming. Wait, there's a question. Yes, Rick.
Question, do you have a follow-up meeting planned?
You know,
Or any
we don't, but I'm thinking we maybe ought to. The response has been sobering. Yes, George?
Thank you, Patty and District.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for coming, everybody.